Fight fans, welcome to the PBC podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Buhari and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome everyone to the PBC podcast. I'm Kenneth Buhari.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
We want to thank you all for tuning in. Big time boxing returns this weekend. More on that in a second. Plus, Ronnie Shields joins us this week in a really fun, informative interview that I'm sure you guys will enjoy. And in this week's toe-to-toe segment, Mike and I will list the greatest career comebacks in boxing history. Nice trip down memory lane for us aficionados. Just a lot to go over. And with little time, without further ado, let's jump right into the PBC Fight of the Week. This Saturday, February 5th, fight fans will witness the return of one-time Keith One-Time Thurman, the former unified world welterweight champion, takes on former 140-pound world champion Mario Barrios at Michelob Ultra Arena at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, live on Fox Sports PBC pay-per-view. The action begins at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and of course, we begin here with the essentials.
Okay, here we go. Keith Thurman, 29-1, 22 knockouts. Barrios, 26-1, 17 knockouts. They are both 4-1 in their last 5 fights. Thurman with 1 knockout, Barrios with 3 knockouts. They both actually lost their most recent fights. Thurman to Manny Pacquiao, split decision in July 2019. Barrios to Gervonta Davis, 11th round TKO in this past June. Thurman has a 71% knockout percentage, Barrios 63. I found this category interesting. Thurman 160 rounds, Barrios 142 rounds.
Wow.
In terms of rounds, they actually have similar experience. Thurman 33 years old, Barrios 26. Thurman turned pro in 2007, Barrios 2013. They both fight from an orthodox stance. The dimensions are almost the same. Thurman's 5'9.5", or listed as 5'9.5". Barrios 5'10". Thurman 69-inch reach, Barrios 71. Thurman is from Clearwater, Florida, and Barrios is a Texan. He's from San Antonio.
That's really, really interesting. I mean, you read that and you know, it sounds like a 50-50 fight. You mentioned their recent fights, although in the case of Thurman, recent is relative. How much of a factor will ring rust be in Thurman's performance?
2.5 years is a long time. These days, if you take a year off because of COVID or whatever else is going on, it doesn't seem like that long. But 2.5 years is a long time. So I really don't know. He told me he started kind of slowly in training camp after such a long break, but has gotten sharper and sharper with good sparring. He kept emphasizing how good the sparring has been. So he's felt better and better as time has progressed. I think he'll be okay, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's a major factor depending on how he prepared, in the gym, as you say. But timing, the ability to take a punch, all of those things matter. Truth is, Thurman of 2016 will be a strong favorite in this one. I'm not so sure that's the case in 2022. Nevertheless, Thurman is still the favorite, which leads to my next question. Is Mario Barrios being overlooked?
Not by Thurman. I think Thurman is too experienced to overlook anyone, first of all. He knows what Barrios is capable of, and I know he doesn't think size will be as much of a factor as maybe some people do. He pointed out that Barrios is a little taller and has a little bit longer reach than he does, so when they walk into the ring, it may actually look like Barrios is the bigger guy.
Sure.
And he's obviously a younger guy, too. Also, Thurman really wants to make a good impression after such a long layoff. I think he's really motivated for this fight.
Yeah, I mean, Barrios he's only 26 years old. He's probably not even a finished product yet. I think the move to 147 is just what the doctor ordered for a guy who's 5'10", has been struggling to make weight for a while. This is a good boxer with heart, good power in both hands, an excellent body puncher, and we've seen Keith hurt to the body before. And he has a great corner in Virgil Hunter. Now, that said, some people would have suggested Barrios first take a soft touch in this new weight class. Was it wise of him to face Thurman in his 147-pound debut?
My gut says no, that it wasn't wise, but that'll depend on the outcome. If he gets beat up, people are going to say, well, that wasn't a good idea, facing an elite welterweight in your first fight at the weight. If he wins, it'll be like winning the lottery. He'll instantaneously become a major player in the division, which would obviously be very lucrative for him. That kind of thing. I probably would have had him face a transition opponent, but I applaud the bold move on his part. I wish more fighters would take such risks because it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I mean it's a risk, but a calculated one. Thurman hasn't fought in like 30 months. He has had it rough in nearly every fight he's had over the past 5-6 years. Now he's up against a young, hungry fighter in Barrios who may be in his natural weight class. Would I have taken Thurman in my first fight at 147, this version of one time? I don't know, but hey, no risk, no reward. Switching gears for a second, what does a Thurman win mean for the welterweight division in boxing?
I think that depends on how he looks in the process. If he blows out Barrios, he's an attractive opponent for any of the title holders, once again, like instantaneously. I think his name will be right back in the mix. His name being back in the mix would make an already rich division even richer because he's a well-known commodity. He's well-liked. People like to watch him fight. If he looks so-so, if he wins but looks so-so doing it, I think that might be a problem for him. Maybe there wouldn't be as much interest in him. He really has to look good in this fight. I think that's important in this fight.
Yeah, exactly. And if he does, like you said, the possibilities are endless. Spence Thurman, Thurman Garcia too, Thurman Ugas, Thurman Ennis. One of the biggest names in boxing returning to form, I think, is always a good thing. What about Barrios? What does a Barrios win for the welterweight division mean for the welterweight division and boxing?
Right. I just talked about the depth. That would add another name to the mix. As you know, when someone delivers a big upset, and I think that's how this would be perceived, they generate a lot of excitement. And if he could do something spectacular like dominate or stop Thurman, that would make the division that much more interesting. So adding another element, adding to the depth is always a positive thing for the division.
Yeah, and I keep having this vision of Barrios taking on Errol Spence in front of a massive Texas crowd or a rematch with Gervonta Tank Davis. Obviously, I think it depends on how Barrios wins, but an impressive victory not only upsets the apple cart. I mean, I think it sends everything into a tailspin, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, it can be a great thing. As you said, fresh blood in in one of the greatest divisions, in the sport.
Glamour division, yeah.
Glamour division. How do you expect the fight to play out?
I think, honestly, this really all depends on what Thurman has left. I think he's probably healthy now after such a long break, or healthy as he's been in a long time after such a long break. That's what he's told me. He said he was healthy a long time ago. He's been ready to fight for a while. So I'm going to take his word on that. I'm going to also assume that rest isn't going to be an enormous factor. It may end up being a factor, but I'm assuming that's not going to be an enormous factor. So I think Barrios is going to hold his own in the early rounds as Thurman sheds whatever rust there might be. And then eventually he'll find a groove, I think. I think Thurman's the better fighter, naturally a little bit bigger at this point. I think he's going to start to impose his will on Barrios. I think Thurman will become more and more dominating as the fight progresses. Again, though, I want to make this clear. If Thurman is off because of the layoff or any other reason, I think we could be in for a surprise.
Oh, yeah. I think he's going to come out throwing combinations and look to establish himself in the center of the ring, but that may, take some time if it happens at all, obviously depending on the ring rust age and so forth. Barrios is going to be going to the body and trying to get his respect early, and I believe that will lead to fireworks. And should that happen, Mike, whatever happens, who do you think is going to win?
Okay, since I have to make a prediction, I'm going to say Thurman stops Barrios late in the fight or wins a clear decision if he's anywhere near his best. If he's 80% or 85% or more of his best, I think that he wins. It'll be an obvious win, a convincing win. Maybe not completely dominating, but I think it's going to be a convincing win.
I like it. I like Thurman here too. I like him by decision in a rough and tumble fight. I think he begins to shed some of the rust midway and is busier, landing the better shots and ultimately pulling away in an eventful affair. And I just know Mike and I are both 2-1 in the prediction league, but that may change after Saturday night. Let's move on to the co-feature. Another star boxer coming back, 4-division world champion Leo Santa Cruz returns against Keenan Carbajal. Mike, what can you tell us about Carbajal?
Well, there's a kind of interesting backstory, kind of sad backstory, actually. If I have this straight, he's the grand nephew of Michael Carbajal. In other words, Keenan is
Right.
the grandson of Michael's brother, um, but he's estranged from him. Keenan Carbajal is trained by Danny Carbajal, who served time in prison for stealing money from Michael. It's an ugly situation. So anyway, Michael Carbajal is actually rooting for Leo Santa Cruz. Anyway, as a fighter, Cabral has had some ups and downs. Had some ups and downs early in his career, but he's become a decent boxer over the last several years. He's won 18 straight fights, mostly in or around Phoenix, which is where the family lives. The problem for him is that he's faced no one even remotely like Santa Cruz. So this is a big step up for Carbajal.
Yeah, I'm thinking in my head that it is a big step up, but it's his kind of fight. I mean, he's an all-action fighter. He's going to bring it. The question is, does the 1 year layoff help or hurt Santa Cruz?
I don't know how it would help him, although it probably took him a little bit of time to recover from the loss to Davis. And I'm thinking more in terms maybe emotionally than physically. I don't think it'll hurt him. It seems like in the COVID era, a year off is like nothing. That's like normal these days. I expect Leo to be sharp. He's a machine. He's just going to come in there and do his thing.
Yeah, I think it helps, especially after the KO loss, to rest, recharge the batteries, and give it one more go in a career that I believe already qualifies him for the Hall of Fame. But is there any concern about the knockout loss to Gervonta Tank Davis? Is there some residue from that?
I don't think so. I guess some guys might not recover from that kind of trauma. I mean, again, I mean more emotionally than physically. I don't think it'll be a problem for Santa Cruz, though. I see that as a good fighter who took a shot against a better fighter, big punching better fighter, and just things didn't go his way. It happens, and I think Santa Cruz sees it that way too. He actually told me as much. That's how he looked at it. He gave it a shot, didn't work out. Time to move on. I think that's his attitude.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a devastating punch, no doubt, but that's where the rest comes into. Yet, even so, how about all the wars Santa Cruz has been? I mean, he's 33 years old. How might that affect him?
That's a good question. I think it was Santa Cruz who generally handed out the beatings in his fights, but yeah, he's also taken quite a few punches over a long period of time. I'm guessing he's okay right now, and he will be for a while, but who knows? The wear and tear, can rear its ugly head at any time. But I don't sense that he's lost anything. I think he's still got it. I think he still has some strong fights left in him.
And so I assume you're picking him?
Yeah. Like you said, I think Carbajal is going to come to fight. He's on a roll, but I just think, again, Santa Cruz is going to do his thing. He's going to throw punches and bunches, wear Carbajal down, and stop him somewhere between the middle rounds and like round 8, something along those lines, depending on how tough Carbajal is. And I guess he's pretty tough. I think it'll be fun as long as it lasts, but I think I think Leo gets back in the win column.
Yeah, I like Santa Cruz here too by decision. Expecting another war, expecting it to be fun like you, but he's just got too much experience, too much skill and ring IQ, and I think that's going to be the difference. Now, the televised opener is the kind of fight I just love. Former 2-division champ Luis Nery on the comeback trail against a rising undefeated fighter in Carlos Castro. Great 122-pound bout here. Mike, what's your take on Nery coming off the TKO loss to Brandon Figueroa?
I really wrestle with this. I honestly, I do not know what to think of Nery after that performance. I don't know him very well, but that was a bad loss. He came into that fight as kind of a hot, feared fighter, and he left the ring just a badly beaten guy. I wonder about his confidence, which I don't say too often. If he's mentally tough, and I don't know if he is, he'll probably be okay. He's got good tools. If he's not, we'll see how things play out for him.
Yeah, it could be interesting. I mean, I think Nery's his power is real. He certainly hurt Figueroa in the first round, and that makes him, to me, formidable against anyone. But I thought legitimate questions were raised by his performance, too. I mean, he was worn down, and although he clearly hits plenty hard, perhaps not as hard as he hit at 118 pounds, he seems to have issues with Figueroa's size. Now, everyone has issues with Figueroa's size, to be fair, but Castro isn't exactly a midget. What are your thoughts on Castro following his KO win over Oscar Escandón last August?
Right. The thing about Castro that stood out for me in that fight was his resilience. If you recall, Escandón
Yeah.
came to win that fight. He wasn't messing around. He was all over Castro from beginning to end. Castro withstood the pressure and gradually took over, which I really thought was impressive. And he finished the job by scoring a knockout.
Yeah.
Castro was maybe a little more vulnerable than I expected, which was a little bit surprising. Early on in the fight, but he overcame it, and that's what good fighters do. He's a good fighter.
Yeah, he is. I really like the fact that he closed the show, that he didn't just settle for the decision win, but he went out there to make a statement. I think his, second camp with Manny Robles, I'm hoping to see a better Castro. There's certainly a lot of skill there. How do you expect the fight to play out?
I really don't know what to think about this fight. A part of me thinks Neary is the more dynamic guy based on what I've seen in the past. But after what happened against Figueroa, I just don't know. Maybe the fight will look like the Castro Escandón fight. Maybe Neary has success early and Castro comes on later in the fight. I really don't know. I could see Neary being the Neary of old, or I could see Castro dominating, end up, controlling the fight as he did against Escandón. So I really don't know.
I think Castro is going to do what he always does and try to control the distance and avoid getting into a firefight with Neary. I'm sure he'll try to catch Neary coming in, but that's tricky. Neary has a lot of experience, and he's going to be looking for countering opportunities. Castro is going to have to avoid those big shots from a big puncher in Neary. Will he, is the question, Mike.
I think everything I've said kind of adds up to this. I think it's as close to a 50-50 fight as you get. But you know what? If this fight had taken place at 118, I might pick Neary, but it's not. It's taking place at 122. I think Castro is he proved himself in the Escandón fight. He's a really good fighter. He's the hot guy. Neary's coming off with just a horrible, horrible loss. So I'm going to go with the guy who has the momentum. And I'm going to say Castro outboxes him and wins a clear decision.
Yeah, I like Castro to win a unanimous decision here, perhaps even stop Neary. I think, again, he'll have to avoid that big shot, but I expect him to, and I expect him to win decisively. Now, originally, Josecito Lopez was scheduled to take on Abel Ramos, but Lopez pulled out with an injury, and we've got a pretty good replacement. 154-pound phenom Jesus Ramos takes on the rejuvenated Vladimir Hernandez in a terrific matchup. Mike, what are your thoughts on Ramos's progression to this point?
Well, as I've said, I really like Ramos. We know about his power, but he's shown us in the past few fights that he could also win by boxing, which is ideal. You want to have a complete guy who could, win in different ways. I think he gets better every time he steps into the ring. One thing that stands out to me with him always is his poise, which is particularly impressive given his age. The guy's only 20 years old. He could do some really special things before he's finished.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with this kid. I like the way he's being developed, the experience he's getting. There could be something special here. Hernandez, of course, will be looking to derail Ramos, and he's gotten pretty good at upsetting folks. What's your take on his recent run?
When I heard that he was the guy stepping in, I was thinking, man, this isn't your average replacement opponent. Right. He outboxed Alfredo Angulo pretty handily, although Angulo obviously was well over the hill when that happened, but still a big name guy. But the win over Julian Williams was just shocking. The Mexican, and he earned the victory too. It wasn't like it didn't look like some kind of fluke. He just kept coming and coming
right.
to pull away in the later rounds. He was just ridiculously fit. That's one thing that really stood out to me. And that could pose problems for a lot of opponents, including this one.
Yeah, he's shown himself to be durable, skilled, and tough, and that means a rough night out for any opponent. How do you expect this fight to play out?
I think Hernandez is going to do the exact same thing that he did against Williams, but it won't work out as well against Ramos. I think the youngster will have to withstand a storm in the early rounds, but he'll begin to take over by the middle of the fight. I imagine Hernandez walking into some big, big shots, which Ramos is still capable of delivering. He might survive because of his toughness and fitness, but I don't think he's going to have his hand raised. I think Ramos wins this fight by decision.
Yeah, I think Ramos will try to box here, sharpshoot some. Hernandez is going to try to get inside and make him work. If he can do that, effectively and take Ramos into deep waters, we're going to see what the kid has. I got to tell you, this is the sort of matchmaking that I absolutely love. I mean, it's the kind of fight that can help a young boxer mature and give him that necessary experience in the trenches, much like Emmanuel Augustus did for Floyd Mayweather, or it can expose him. I like Ramos here too. Unanimous decision. I think Hernandez is a tough out, so I expect Ramos to use his boxing skills and overcome a serious test on his rise toward the 154-pound division. Also, on Saturday night, prior to the PBC pay-per-view, PBC on Fox will bring you two excellent showdowns. Abel Ramos against Luke Santa Maria in 10-round action, and a fight I can't wait for, Ryan Call versus Omar Juarez in 140-pound action. Should be a fun night of fights. It's time to bring in our guest this week, a man who needs no introduction. He is without question one of the best trainers in the game, the person behind undefeated WBC middleweight champion Jamal Charlo and undefeated super middleweight David Morrell Jr. Oh, and he's also, trained guys like Pernell Whitaker, Evander Holyfield, and Mike Tyson, to name a few in the past, Mr. Ronnie Shields. Ronnie, first things first, I know you spent some time in the Dominican Republic recently. How was your vacation?
Oh, the vacation was great, man. My wife and I. It was a much-needed vacation after 2 years of being locked down. Couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything. But the vacation was really relaxing and nice.
That's good. I'm glad you feel refreshed, because it looks like you might have a busy 22, huh?
Absolutely. I got a bunch of small fights coming out right now, and I'm just trying to keep my guys as busy as possible right now, and just working every day.
So the last time we saw you, you were in the corner of unbeaten super middleweight sensation David Morrell Jr. He stopped Atlanta's Fox. My first question about this is, how did you connect with Morrell in the first place?
It was through the Cubas, actually. When David first came over, they called me about him when he first came over a couple of years ago. And they asked me would I be interested in training him. I said, yeah, absolutely, no problem. And I had never seen anything on David before, but I just know he came over from Cuba. And so anyway, he went to Minnesota, and they called me and said, well, he wanted to stay up there. So I said, okay, no problem. So he did, and then we had a couple of guys that fought on a couple of cards that he headlined. And I saw him, and I said, man, this kid is really good. And then for the last fight, they called me like 3 weeks before the fight and asked me, if I would be interested in working with him. I said, yeah, when is he fighting? They say 3 weeks. Wow. So I said, yeah, no problem. Go ahead and send him down. So they did, and, and we clicked right away. He's going to be a really good fighter.
What impressed you about him when you first saw him? What stood out immediately?
Well, just his confidence. This kid, he's a very confident fighter. He's confident in his abilities, and he, asked him to show me some things, and he did. And, and like I said, I was really impressed by him. And the good thing about it is he's the only Cuban that I worked with that really speaks English so you can understand him.
Oh, that's interesting. Has he evolved a lot since you started working with him?
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, just right away, I start showing him different combinations that he need to work on, and and just right away he picks it up.
Now, is there any part of the game that you'd like to see him improve, or?
Actually, man, I mean, I think the kid does everything great. I mean, he really picks up everything so well. He's a natural born fighter, and he's one of these kids, man. He wants to learn. He wants to do more every day. He wants to keep doing more. He wants to keep learning, and that's the kind of guy that I really like to work with, because it never gets boring. He just he keeps you going. He's young, and he got a lot of energy, and and I love it.
Now, do you feel he's ready for a world title?
I don't think so. I mean, I wouldn't rush him into that. He only has like 7 fights,
Right.
and he won the WBA regular title like in 4 or 5 fights, that's really kind of pushing him fast right there. But I think he's in a good position, though. He's, and the reason I say that is because is a lot of good up and coming young fighters that's coming up that he can really fight, and I think he can beat them all. But I really wouldn't want to push him too fast because there's still a lot of things that he has to learn.
Makes sense. You worked with Arislandi Lara, another Cuban southpaw, for a long time. Does Morel remind you of him at all, or is there another fighter maybe that he reminds you of?
Well, he doesn't remind me anything of Lara because Lara basically was more of a boxer.
Mm-hmm.
But this kid, he likes to fight. He likes to go forward. He don't like to take a backward step. And that's different from a lot of Cuban guys that I worked with, And so, this kid, man, I'm telling you, he's going to be the real deal. With just a little bit more experience, he's going to beat everybody they put him in with.
At some point, will you have him spar with Jamal Charlo?
Absolutely. At some point, yes, absolutely. The only thing is, he's a southpaw. Well, he's really orthodox, but they, it's just like a lot of Cubans, they turn him southpaw. But the kid is strong on both sides. So, and he goes right-handed every now and then, also, but he just feel more comfortable as a southpaw.
Now, speaking of Jamal, obviously there are rumors swirling of a Canelo fight. From your perspective, if that fight does happen, why do you believe Jamal beats Canelo?
Well, it's an old saying, styles make fights. And, the thing about Canelo, watching everybody that he's fought, he's never fought a style like Jamal. And, it's crazy to say that because he's fought a lot of good fighters. But, he's never fought a guy with a really great jab and a strong jab, and also a guy who can punch with both hands. He's either fought a guy who, a lot of the guys that he fights move a lot, not stand right in front of him and throw punches, along with him. But, he's never fought a guy that's as accurate as a Jamal Charlo, who, his jab, he lands frequently with the jab. He's dropped guys with the jab, and when he throws combinations, man, he get in his rhythm. He's a tough guy when he gets in his rhythm. And I think, that'll be a great, great fight between Jamal and Canelo.
Now, what is it, in your opinion, that makes Canelo so good?
Well, I think he studies the game. When you're saying he practices on everything. I've been against him twice. The first time it was with Herman Centron, and then the second time, obviously, it was Landy Lara. And the guy, he's a strong fighter, number one. Number two, you can always see he's always in shape. I've never seen him come into a fight out of shape.
Yeah.
And you can see he studies boxing. He studies his opponents, and you can see he practices on defense a lot, and but he practices a lot on offense also, but mostly power punches. He wants to get you out of there, and nothing wrong with that, but but still, he's the guy that he's a student of the game.
Yeah.
Right. Ronnie, I'm just curious. Did you think Lara won that fight against Canelo?
Absolutely. And I went back and I watched it one time. And I just thought Lara outpointed. I thought he won 7-5. It was a good fight, but he frustrated Canelo. He's the only guy that I've besides Floyd Mayweather that's really frustrated him. And and you could see the difference of who won the fight after the fight. When you look at our corner, then you look at their corner. They were so quiet. He walked back to the corner. Nobody was like jumping in the ring, picking him up, doing none of this stuff, because they knew he lost the fight. They knew it, but but they would never say that. But but your reaction shows everything. And if you look at our corner, you'll see us jumping up, high-fiving, doing all this stuff. And, and then you hear you lose a split decision, and it all goes away.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. So back to Jamal and Canelo. So what about the move up to 168? Is there any concern about, Jamal losing any speed or power or being at any sort of significant disadvantage because of that?
Well, if anything, Jamal is going to be stronger at 168 than he is 160. The thing about it, man, this kid, man, I've been with him his whole career, and I've seen everything with him. I've seen him when he, as he moving up in weight, he carries his power with him, and that's a great thing to have. And he's such a disciplined guy when it comes to his weight, and people still wondering, man, when they see him in person, I can't believe you're 160 pounds, and it's like because his stature is really big.
Yeah.
He's filled out, and but I think the thing I think you have to understand is when we first get in the gym and start training, Jamal is like 175. So, and as he coming down, he don't lose power, he gaining power, and and when he gets down to 160, and he's in great shape, his power is definitely there. But at 168, I'm telling you, his power, he's going to be even stronger at 168 because he's not going to have to cut weight because he's going to be right there, and he can make it like, if he's coming in, like we weighed him the other day, and he was 176 the other day. So that's nothing. That's only 8 pounds. That ain't nothing for him, and, so he feels good, especially when he's coming down. He get to 168. That's when, you have to start spending a little bit more time to try to drop to 160. But, he's going to be a natural at 168 when he get there.
That's a gigantic fight. It's a really exciting concept, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Because, anytime you got two different styles, that makes for a great fight. If you got guys that fight the same way, then it kind of gets a little boring. But these two guys, man, with Jamal, he can push the fight when he has to push. And then when he has to get on the outside and box, he can do both. And, with his in and out style, that makes it an exciting fight.
Yeah, see what happens. So David Benavidez and Caleb Plant are two other potential names at 168 for Jamal. What do you think of those fights for him?
Well, at first I really wanted the Caleb Plant fight, but of course, it was a bigger fight for him when he moved that for Canelo.
Right.
So, but in Benavidez, it would have been a great fight, but when he lost his title on the scale, it doesn't make sense now. Why fight a guy just to say, okay, we go fight now, but okay, and you get what? What do you get out of it? When you get to a certain level in the sport, you want to fight for something, and it's not like it's gonna, it's not like a big money draw, for either guy, fighting each other for no title, for nothing. So, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense. That's the old saying. And, and just to say that, okay, I beat this guy, but what does it get you? It doesn't automatically get you a fight with Canelo.
Interesting.
Makes sense.
Now, Ronnie, you yourself, you were one of the best amateurs and also a top contender, during a time when being a top contender was no joke. How has that experience helped you as a trainer?
Well, I think it helped me a lot because, just looking at all the other guys, when I was fighting and I saw all the other guys, I've always wanted to outdo everybody. So, and looking at it right now, I basically look at it the same way. But, it's so much easier when you're a champion than a contender. Because being a contender now, what does that get you? It really doesn't get you anything now. Because I've seen so many guys that's already mandatory, and it's never gotten a title fight. So what does it mean? And so, boxing has changed a little bit over the years. Now it means more about who's the draw for the money. These champions want to make money now. They want to fight guys that, who they can make money with. And if you're not a draw, then I've seen guys who's a good draw. They get the fights before, for these guys that are ranked ahead of them.
The game's definitely changed now. But getting back to you as a trainer, though, does it help? When your fighters has to dig deep, or is in some trouble, or is having difficulty, knowing that you've been in that kind of situation before. What to tell them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is why training is so important, because you basically, man, I try to put my guys in different situations in training camp. When I might be telling them, look, man, we need this round here, so we're gonna throw a variety of punches. We're gonna push until the end. Everything is about getting the heart rate up high, and then you got to get it down, then get it back up high and get it down. And if you practice these drills in the gym, then your body is used to it when you get into that fight. And sometimes, you see guys, and I've always experienced it. Sometimes I get a guy that, he don't push as hard as he should push. Then when they get in the fight, he say, guys will come back and say, I'm tired. Well, now you understand why I was telling you have to push more in the gym, because now either you want to win or you can just go give it away. As simple as that. But I got a good crop of guys right now that really understand what I tell them, and win, lose, or draw, I really get good efforts out of the majority of my guys.
Now, from your perspective as a trainer, you kind of alluded to this right now, but what is the difference between a fighter who stays in shape between camp and a fighter who doesn't?
Oh my God, it's crazy because you have to work harder. Fighters have to work harder when they come in the gym and they're like 30 pounds overweight. I hate that. And knowing you have a fight coming up and knowing you're 30 pounds overweight, so the majority of camp have to be weight loss, not strategy, and I just hate that, man. And and you could sit, no matter how much you sit down with guys and explain it to them, they don't see it until you get closer to the wins. Then, I'll never do this again. But what happens with these younger guys? They'll come back the same thing.
Do it again.
Yeah. But what I've done now is I've moved them up in weight. I got one kid. He does this all the time. And I keep telling him, I say, look, man, the next fight is not going to be like this. We're going to go up to the next division. And that's what I did with him for his fight that he has coming up right now. He was a 147-pounder. Now I got to bring him to 154. Now he's starting to understand, these guys are going to be stronger, because remember, they coming down from probably 170 like you are, So, so I just keep telling them, look, if you don't take care of your career, then your career is not going to take care of you.
What I don't know if you can answer this, but what percentage of guys show up day one at camp in shape?
About 5%.
Oh, that's sad. That's sad, man. Okay.
No,
I hope they listen to this.
But being an ex-fighter myself, I tried not to be anywhere over like 10, 12 pounds, And when you try to talk to guys, you try to explain that to them, but the generations are different. Everything is different now, because when I was fighting, we didn't have all these things all these different, vitamins you have to take, and, all this stuff. It's so much stuff now that these guys take, oh no, I need this. This is going to help me when I'm out there losing weight and this and that. And it's just so much stuff. I mean, it's just like conditioning trainers. I never had a conditioning coach before. I mean, I always just did it old school. We ran. We did our exercises, and that was it. These guys today now, but these guys today now, they depend too much on all this other stuff, plus conditioning guys. And, this is why so many guys are failing drug tests, because they taking things that they really didn't even read up on it. They let the conditioning guy, who maybe not even be a boxing guy, he say, hey, man, if this stuff is in it, I'm going to fail the drug test. And I've seen it over and over and over. That's what happens. It's not that they're trying to be a drug cheat or nothing, but they're taking stuff that, that's not legal to take. They have stuff in it that's not legal. And I see so many guys failing drug tests, even these little small fights. It happens all the time.
Speaking of training, Anthony Joshua came by your gym some time back. What are your thoughts on him? And is there any update on that situation that you know of?
Well, when he first came by, he came by for a couple of days, and we had great talks, long talks, and he told me I was under the radar. And I said, what you mean I'm under the radar? I said, man, everybody knows me.
Maybe in the UK.
Yeah. I said, but it's a guy that's with him that told him he'd be a fool not to talk to me. And it was a young guy, a young kid, actually, like 22, 23 years old. And he came with him, but Joshua said, hey man, this is the guy who told me I need to come here, So we had long talks, and I put him through some workouts, and then actually about 3 weeks later, they called me up and they flew me out to London, and I had some long talks. I was out there for like 5 or 6 days, and we had some long talks there. I worked with a couple of his guys that he had in the gym. So he just wanted to see how I would handle a training camp and stuff like that. And, if I could work with some guys that he has, on his team. And, it went well. It went great. So I still talk to some of the guys that was there, and I think he's going to make a decision in the next couple of weeks or so who he wants to work with.
Interesting. Okay, we'll keep paying attention. This week marks the 20th anniversary of Vernon Forrest's monster victory over Shane Mosley. I can't believe it's 20 years.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your memories of that fight?
Yeah, man. I mean, I remember before that fight was even talked about. When I started working with Vernon, I asked him one day. I say, if you had to try to fight anybody, who would it be? He said, Sugar Shane Mosley. And I was like, wow. I say, he said, look, man, he said, I beat Shane twice in Olympic. I beat him in Olympic trials twice. He said, I beat him in the finals. And then I beat him in the box offs. He said, I got his number. He said, he can't mess with me. He can't touch me. He said, trust me, man, when I tell you, it would be an easy fight. And I said, Vernon, I don't doubt that. I said, but you got to really work your butt off in order to make things like that happen. And, it just went through one end after the other, basically, because, Vernon was really, he was on the cusp of getting into like the top 10. And Shane was already there, and Shane was already at the top of his game, basically.
Right.
And so I told him, I said, man, it can happen. And then I remember when he first fought with Sweet Pea Whitaker, and he did so good against him. I was like, wow. He was a little bit bigger than Pernell, but still, Pernell used to run people out of the gym because they couldn't touch him. But Thurman was one of the few guys that was spar with him and actually hit him and able to hit him. And I was like, wow, I can't believe this, you know. And Fanatic told me one day, he said, man, this guy definitely going to be a world champion, man. He said, you just got to stay on him the whole time. I said, oh, yeah, absolutely. So as time went on, and when they first announced the fight with Vernon and Shane, I mean, he was so excited, man. I mean, he was excited to come to the gym. He was so happy, you know. And I was like, wow, you know, and I fed off of his energy, you know. And we really worked hard. You know, he said, man, you ain't gonna have no problems out of me. Whatever you want me to do, that's what I'm gonna do. You know. So it was myself and Al Mitchell, and he did exactly what we asked him to do. And I had never felt more confident or composed going into a fight than that fight right there, because you know I knew he was so confident that he could win it. And he told me, look, man, he said, I know how good Shane was. He said, but I'm just better at everything. You know, he said, I have the better jab, I have the better right hand. Only thing he got over me is the speed. He said, but I can control the speed with my jab. And I said, that's exactly what you have to do. And man, the training camp was so good. And when he got into the fight, man, I mean, I was so calm and confident. Probably, I'd never been that way before. And I just felt so good to be that way. And there was no pressure whatsoever. You know, Vernon just got in there and he did what we trained for. And after they announced him as the winner, man, he came to me, he hugged me, he said, I told you. And so I said, yep, I was right.
That
and
was
then
him.
Then we fought him again.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say those fights, to me, for just watching from the outside, he was at his very best in those fights. Is that right?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was going great for him, man. He you know, he was happy on the outside. And, you know, that's one of the most important things when you're happy on the outside, you know. And then when you get inside that ring, you have no worries. You just have to worry about the guy that's in front of you. And he felt so good going into that fight. And then even in the rematch, you know, he said, look, I know this is going to be a tougher fight than the first fight. You know, because Vernon hurt him in the first fight. He hurt him. And nobody was able to hurt Shane. But Vernon really hurt him. I think it's like the third or fourth round. Vernon hit him and hurt him with an uppercut. And, you know, and we worked on those shots every single day. And it worked for him. And in the second fight, you know, we knew that Shane wasn't going to try to come in the way he did the first fight. We knew Shane was going to try to move around and let Vernon come forward. So we didn't have any problems with that because we knew that was what was going to happen. I think Shane just thought if he can go to 12 rounds, he can win his decision. But we made sure that Vernon pressed and landed punches and, you know, and then let Shane keep running. And that's exactly what happened. And Vernon won again.
Good memories. So the first fight was the first time we saw someone named Al Heyman. Can you tell us more about working with him then and then having that relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I remember Vernon met Al first, and then he called me up, and he told me about Al. So I said, okay, cool. He said, I'm going to start working with him. I said, all right. And, you know, I've heard of Al only through the music part of it. You know, I knew him through music. And so Vernon gave me his number, and I called him up. And, you know, and so we introduced myself to him, and then we started. Me and Al at that time, we was talking every single day. You know, when he first got involved with Vernon. And I think the first fight that we fought was in New York against, what's his name?
Raoul Frank?
Raoul Frank. It was a title eliminator. And so Al, he said, I'm going to let you guys do your thing. He said, just whatever y'all need, let me know. Just want to make sure Vernon is comfortable. you know, and everything. I said, okay, yeah, man, everything is good. So, but we talked on the phone every single day. You know, and then after the Raul Frank fight, the first fight, remember, it was a no contest. It was a no contest. And Vernon thought he blew the Mosley fight because it was a no contest. He said, no, man, you know, he was crying. Vernon was crying so much in the back. And me and Al was trying to explain to him, Vernon, you didn't lose anything. You got to fight him again. You know, it was a no contest. And the IBF is gonna make you guys fight again. Al had already got confirmation that, you know, that they was gonna, you know, order that fight again. And so when they did the second time, Vernon, you know, and Vernon beat him, and then, you know, of course, that's how he was able to get the Shane Mosley fight. Mm. But Al and I, man, we talked almost every day. And then when we went to training camp in Big Bear, California, Al used to come up almost every weekend and watch Vernon train.
Wow. That's amazing.
It was Al and Sam Watson.
Sam, of course.
Every weekend they came up and watched Vernon train.
That's amazing. Now, you know, when Vernon was training in your Houston gym, this is what I heard. Apparently, there were a couple young boys hanging around the gym who really idolized Vernon and who Vernon took a liking to, and almost as if like in a Hollywood movie, those little boys turned out to be pretty good boxers too. Can you talk about Vernon's relationship with them, and who are these boxers?
I'm not sure which one, because it was so many
really?
guys that they really liked Vernon. I mean, because Vernon, he was a lot different than a lot of these other guys that, you know, Vernon spent time, you know, helping all these other kids. You know, he used to do the hand pads with like Juan Diaz, his little brother, and, you know, just a bunch of the kids that was there. He always talked to them, and I mean, you know, and even Jamil and Jamal.
Those must be those two boys then.
yeah, even them, you know, and they really loved Vernon because Vernon spent time with them. You know, Vernon used to come to me, hey man, can I do the pads with them? Yeah, come on. You could do the pads with them. And he did. He did the pads with them. You know, they would even go and run with Vernon.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, but Vernon did that. He not only did with them, he did it with a bunch of kids though. You know, a lot of the amateur kids that was in our gym. He just took a liking to all of them.
Now, I got one last question. We have one last question for you, Ronnie. My good friend Lamont Jones swears that he beats you in spades and dominoes all the time. And so I want to know, when are you going to get it together and finally give this man a challenge?
Man, let me tell you something. Lamont, right? Lamont has never beat me in anything.
Uh-oh.
Lamont, he got this game. Look, I beat him in spades. I beat him in dominoes. So, you know, he's lying if he say he won even one game. You know, it's just impossible for him to beat me. But then he got this game that he made up. And it's impossible to beat him in because he changed the rules.
Pretty smart.
I believe that.
He changed the rules up every time. I said, hold up, man. The last hand, it was like this. No. You don't understand. This is a different hand, so it's different. It's different rules.
I can't wait for him to hear this. Goodness, Lamont.
Yeah, Lamont is crazy, but he gets so mad that he can't win that he gets up and he leaves.
You know, he confessed to me. He was like, I can't beat him. I can't beat him at spades. He told me so. He's just messing around, but hopefully we'll all, get together really soon. Ronnie, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us as always. Wishing you the best of luck, of course, and can't wait to have you back on.
I appreciate it, man. Anytime.
Saturday, February 5th, superstar Keith Thurman is back.
Here comes Thurman.
And he's going toe-to-toe with former champion Mario Barrios. This will fly.
Putting it all on the line.
What a fight! Then get ready for the return of Leo Santa Cruz.
The time has come
As he faces Keenan Carbajal. It will be a night to remember. Live on pay-per-view. Buy now on the Fox Sports app and watch on any screen you want.
It's time for Mike and I to go toe to toe. This week, we're going to examine the greatest career comebacks in boxing history. Keith Thurman is coming back this weekend after nearly 3 years out of the sport. Now, there have been a lot of great comebacks in boxing. That's what Thurman will try to duplicate. So we're going to highlight our 5 greatest career comebacks in boxing. It was really hard to whittle it down to just 5, but we gave it our best go. We're going to go in ascending order. So let's start with number 5, Mike.
Okay, number 5 for me is Mike Tyson. I've been critical of Tyson, who never beat him. My standard line is he never beat a great fighter when that fighter was at or near his prime, which is the truth. I think he's at least somewhat overrated. Hall of Famer, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but not quite as great as people think. That said, you have to give the guy some credit. He had already lost the title in that upset against Buster Douglas when he went to prison for 3+ years for rape between 1991 and 1995. I have to imagine it would be extremely difficult to return to boxing and pick up where you left off after that. But that's more or less what he did. He beat Frank Bruno and then Bruce Seldon to win 2 of the major heavyweight titles in 1996. He became heavyweight champ again. That was his last hurrah, though, and Vander Holyfield knocked him out after the Seldon fight, and that was followed by the earbite fight. And Tyson won some fights to earn a shot at Lennox Lewis's titles later on, but no longer the force he had been. He was beat up and stopped in 8 rounds. So that was basically hit for him. But I also, one other reason that I picked this, and or maybe this is just an addendum to my pick, is Tyson is also a remarkable comeback story in life. I was on the I haven't talked to Mike one-on-one that many times, but I was on the phone with him, I would say about, 10 years after you retired, something like that. I think it was when that the one-man show first started, the one-man show on Broadway first started. Yeah. And I just told him, I said, Mike, I at this point, I think most of us thought you'd either be in prison or dead. And he said, so did I. Wow. And so that's sort of how we saw Mike Tyson at the end of his career. And now look at him; he's completely turned his life around. He's a good citizen. He's a productive guy. He's making a good living, and he's made a comeback. He made a good comeback in boxing. He made a good comeback in life.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good choice. I didn't think of that. The fact that he came back and beat those guys with ease too. I might add, in Bruno and Seldon and. With what, one tune-up fight, Peter McNeely, and that was it. He was right back in the mix. I think it showed how great he really was, but Mike never really had the quality of opponents to really take him into that next tier of great heavyweights. Nevertheless, he is a great heavyweight himself. I mean, a Hall of Famer. With a long list of accomplishments. That was an excellent comeback. Before I get into my number 5, I want to talk about a couple guys who didn't make the cut for my list. One was Tyson Fury, the Gypsy King. He had a remarkable comeback, from going from the king of the division in 2015 and then coming back 3 years later and doing it again in 2020. We'll see where his story goes from here. Another name who didn't make the list that I think just deserves mention is James Toney. Now, Toney didn't have a long layoff, just a few losses. And then was mostly forgotten about, but he never stopped fighting, built himself up again, got back in great shape, and then became, the fighter of the year in 2003 when he had that amazing run, knocking out, beating Jirov and then knocking out Evander Holyfield. Finally, Floyd Mayweather, he took a break from boxing after knocking out Ricky Hatton in 2007, came back in 2009 and continued his reign of dominance. In his case, he doesn't make the cut simply because it was like he never left. I mean, he was a top fighter in the world when he left. He was a top fighter in the world when he returned. He didn't have to come back because he never fell off. So with that said, my number 5 is Azuma Nelson. Maybe a little biased, but Nelson didn't have the longest of layoffs, really only a year and a half. He was already a Hall of Famer by the time he retired in May 1994. He just hadn't looked the same in his last 3 bouts. First, the controversial decision over Gabriel Ruelas, then a disputed draw to Jesse James Leija, and then Leija beat him decisively in their immediate rematch, which is what prompted Nelson to retire. Now, during Nelson's retirement, Ruelas would go on to beat Leija to become the new champion. Then at 37, Nelson came out of retirement, took on Ruelas in his very first fight back, was naturally a big underdog, but he dropped Ruelas in the first, a second time in the fifth. They, put him away in that round. It was an incredible victory. What does he do for an encore after that? He takes on Leija in his next bout and stops him in 6 rounds. Just an incredible return for the professor and his legend.
Yeah, he has a soft spot in my heart because I crossed paths with him a number of times, mostly during the first Ruelas fight, because I was in, it's one of the most memorable things in my career. I went to cover the Nelson Ruelas fight at Estadio Azteca, 126,000 people in Mexico City. It was absolutely insane. I'm not sure how controversial that was. I think it was a competitive fight, but I think Nelson won. And as far as the rematch goes, I just wanted to provide a little bit of backstory. Ruelas wasn't Ruelas in that fight. That was after he delivered the punches that killed Jimmy Garcia.
Right.
And his handlers made an unwise decision, I thought, to have him step right after that. His first fight was against Azuma Nelson, which didn't make a lot of sense to me. I think in a case like that, you definitely want to transition. Instead, you fight one of the best fighters of all time. So I just thought that was a weird choice, but strong performance by Nelson. I think it's one of the best fighters that I saw during my career as a boxing writer.
Yeah, so many tricks up his sleeve. I went back and watched the fight to see whether Ruelas was off, and he fought hard.
Well, he had a different style. It's kind of weird. You'd think that after killing a guy, for lack of a better way to put it, that you would sort of become more of a boxer. But he became more of a brawler. He became more of a slugger. It's like it was almost like he was thinking, I just want to get this over with. I'll do what I have to do, but I don't want to be in here that long.
That's an interesting take. Yeah. Because he definitely, he was fighting super hard, but it wasn't as calculating as
the Leija fight
as he was in the past. That was a great performance.
In a completely different style.
Yeah. I don't know if maybe the early knockdown compelled him to fight that way, or maybe that's what it was. But let's move on to number 4. I'll kick this one off. My number 4 is Larry Holmes. Now, what a second career this man had. In the first career, he established himself as a Hall of Famer and one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. But when Mike Tyson knocked him out in 1988, which is a fight that occurred after Holmes had been out of the ring for nearly 2 years, it looked like his career was over. Comeback failed. But then he returns again in 1991, and he proves he's still formidable. Did he win a world title? No. But he beat Jesse Ferguson. He beat Ray Mercer. He gives a prime Evander Holyfield a lot of problems in their heavyweight title fight. You could argue he beat, Oliver McCall and Brian Neeson as well. And, of course, the win over Butterbean to put the bow on the career of a top 5 heavyweight all time, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting. All the guys that you mentioned, except for Tony, I didn't think of that one. I thought of all the guys that you mentioned. As a matter of fact, my number 5, I was wrestling which Tyson I wanted to go with, Mike or Tyson Fury. And I thought of Larry Holmes. Yeah, I think people pretty much thought he was done after the Tyson fight, Mike Tyson fight, and he just went on and on and on. You know what I think that spoke to is just his ability was so far above everybody else's that even as an old man, he could still just rely on his innate talent and still be competitive. It's pretty remarkable when you stop and think about it.
Yeah. Now, what you got for number 4?
Okay, and I just wanted to point out that I focused more all these guys on. Or one of my criteria was a long layoff. So that was kind of a key thing for me in all my choices. So my number 4 is Vitaly Klitschko. I think this one's kind of under the radar. The elder of the Klitschko brothers held world titles in 1999 and 2000, then again in 2004, 2005, and then he retired because of nagging injuries. He was set to, if you recall, he was set to defend his belt against Hasim Rahman, but injured his knee in training, which was just the latest example, kind of his body falling apart. And he just said in so many words, the hell with it, I can't do this anymore. My body just won't cooperate. And he just walked away and he was done, or so it seemed. Then 4 years later, in 2008, he's like, hey, you know what? I'm feeling pretty damn good here. Maybe I can give this another try. Obviously, the time off had allowed his body to heal. He knocked out Sam Peter in his first fight back to regain the WBC title, successfully defended it 9 times during his second career, and then he retired for good. Hell of a boxing story. And then, as we know, he went on to become major politician in his native Ukraine. He's the mayor of Kiev right now.
Right.
I've seen him interviewed a number of times over the current crisis in Russia, which is kind of surrealistic because I was around him in boxing, so many times, and now he's like this major figure on the world stage. So interesting career, interesting life for this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very impressive human being. I didn't love his comeback, but it was no doubt a great comeback. For him to return to the top of the sport, toward the top of the division, along with his brother. But I don't know. I felt like a lot of the guys that he fought around that time were either old or past it, or his brother was beating them down.
Yeah, it was an era without great. The Klitschko's were the only really good heavyweights. Yeah, at
right.
that time. Yeah.
Right. Yes, I didn't. But nevertheless, it was certainly a great comeback. Let's move on to number 3. I'll go first here, and I suspect we may have some similar names. But my number 3 is Ray Leonard. This is a story that's been told time and time again. Sugar retiring in 1982, came back in '84. He stopped Kevin Howard in a fight where he didn't look that great, and then he retires again, only to come back in 1987 and beat the middleweight king Marvin Hagler in a terrific performance, in my opinion. Yes, I had Leonard winning that fight. I mean, what more can you say? We can get into his other ill-advised comebacks, like the Terry Doris fight and the Hector Camacho, but point blank, the Hagler win. It's really all he needs to be on this list.
Yeah, that's why my number 3 is Sugar Ray Leonard. This could be number 1. I mean, the top 3 I think are pretty much interchangeable. One of the frustrating things about Leonard's career were his injuries, including especially the detached retina, which is why he had long gaps, between fights.
Yeah.
I mean, he should have had so many more fights. We really missed out on a lot of great performances. He had only 2 fights between his knockout of Tommy Hearns in 1981 and the Hagler fight in 1987. That's to me, that's just depressing. Anyway, he was off for, as you mentioned, he was off for 3 years. When he agreed to fight Hagler in '87, it seemed absurd on some level. Leonard was much smaller than Hagler and had that long layoff. Hagler had stopped Hearns in that classic fight only 2 fights earlier in 1985, and he knocked out John Mugabe the following year. Leonard was at that fight, and he said that he saw something in that fight from Hagler that led him to believe that he could beat him. So he came out of retirement and fought Hagler, and damned if he didn't pull it off. I know a lot of people, as you mentioned, I know a lot of people think Hagler should have gotten the decision. I know Hagler wasn't as good as he had been in the past. Still,
right.
that night was just magic. I mean, Leonard's whole career was kind of magic until the very end, and that night was just absolute magic.
Yeah, it certainly was. I remember just being a child and not really knowing much about the sport at that point, but we had gone to visit someone, a relative who was sick, like in the hospital. I just remember that they were, in the hospital bed and so forth, and on the TV was the fight. Was that fight. So I don't know if it was a replay or what, but they were watching that fight on TV. But nonetheless, I agree with you. I don't think Hagler was quite the same, but he was still Marvin freaking Hagler. I think a spectacular win. Let's go on to number 2. I suspect that we may have something similar again. My number 2 is the late, great Muhammad Ali, the greatest of all time, an undefeated heavyweight champ who was stripped of his title due to his political and personal stance to not participate in a war that he felt was unjust, and he wouldn't get his license back until 1970. By then the game had changed, the players had changed, and so had Ali. But one thing that remained was his greatness. I mean, even with the loss to Joe Frazier in 1971, he beat a who's who of heavyweights, including that incredible win over George Foreman in Kinshasa, and then beat Frazier 2 more times. I mean, what can I say about this comeback that hasn't already been said, Mike?
Yeah, I really wrestled with who to put at 1 and who to put at 2, but I ended up putting Muhammad Ali at 2 also. This could easily be number 1 because of the historical significance of his career. I mean, he's the biggest name, and arguably the biggest name in boxing history, greatest heavyweight of all time. I think the greatest heavyweight of all time actually was the first incarnation of Ali, who did things in the ring that we're just never going to see again. And then he was gone. I think you mentioned that he was away for 3.5 years, sort of waiting for this whole. And by the way, Angelo Dundee told me once that those would have been his best years, which is absolutely tragic in my opinion. So basically the 3.5 years he was gone would have been him at his best. So I don't even want to talk about that. It's just too sad. Anyway, so during that period, he was waiting for his case to be adjudicated. We didn't know. Well, I was just a kid, but we didn't know whether he was going to ever return to boxing or he was going to go to prison. We just didn't know what was going to happen. And then the Supreme Court, ruled in his favor, and he was able to come back. He wasn't quite the gazelle he had been. He wasn't quite as quick, as athletic, but he was smarter. He had that guile. So I'm not even sure. I would still go with the younger Ali versus the older Ali just because of the physical tools. But right. I think it's actually a push. I think it's pretty close. So anyway, he comes back. He beats Jerry Quarry, beats Oscar Bonavena, loses a decision to Frazier in that epic first fight. And he ended up losing to Ken Norton. I was blanking on his name all of a sudden. Anyway, so he wins a bunch of fights, earns his shot at George Foreman. Everybody's like, oh my God. They feared for Ali going into that George Foreman fight because Foreman was just annihilating everybody. Remember, this wasn't the jovial guy selling grills later in his life. This was kind of this mean, brooding, scary guy. And Ali wasn't the same Ali as he had been. So people really feared from him. Well, we know what happened. Ali used that guile, his toughness. I think that's something that's underrated with Ali is his toughness and the rope-a-dope to wear down Foreman and knock him out and regain the title 7 years after it was stripped from him. I sort of end my story with that because that sort of completed his comeback. That was arguably the greatest performance, and it was a great comeback.
Yeah, it certainly was. I mean, we've seen a million movies about it, a million stories, a million articles, and it's never enough because it truly was that special. Now, you mentioned a name there. In Kinshasa, I mentioned him as well, and he is my number one. I take it he's yours as well.
George Foreman. It was. As the longer I thought about it, the harder of a choice it was because because Ali's Ali. But I really think this is the most remarkable comeback in terms of the time that he spent out of boxing and then come back to do what he did. Again, the guy just terrorized the heavyweight division the first time around, including, 2 knockouts of Joe Frazier. Then he gets stopped by Muhammad Ali and then leaves boxing for a decade to become a preacher. Fine if that's what he wants to do, but he's gone for 10 years. Yeah. Then in his late 30s, he decides, okay, I'm coming back. I think he wanted to come back. Can't completely bank on this, but I think part of the reason he wanted to come back was to raise money for the church.
Right.
So anyway, he comes back.
And to get in shape, I think he said as well.
Okay, there you go. Well, anyway, he fights himself. Speaking of that, he fights himself into shape. It's not as if he took big fights right out of the gate. He actually fought fight after fight after fight after fight, sort of, to get back into the championship shape. As an underdog, he knocked out Michael Moore to become heavyweight champion again at 45, almost 20 years after he first won it. That's a movie. That's not a boxing resume. That's like a movie, like a real life movie. I mean, it was just absolutely incredible. One quick story. So I'm at the Foreman Moore fight and watching the fight unfold. I think it was I should know this. It's a 10th round knockout.
Yes.
10th round knockout. So I'm watching this fight and I'm sitting next to prominent columnist in Los Angeles, which is where I'm from, where I live. And as the fight's progressing, he starts going, this is a travesty. Foreman is 45 years old. He has no business in the ring with Michael Moore. It's a pretty good heavyweight. I think he's a borderline Hall of Famer, by the way. Yeah. And, and he's just going on and on, round after round. And I'm kind of agreeing with him. I'm thinking, oh man, because George was just getting nothing done. Moore was kind of schooling him, younger, faster guy, and Foreman just couldn't get it done. And then it's not as if we saw it coming. George says he set it up, and I believe him when he says that, but it's not as if we saw it coming while we were watching. All of a sudden, he just lands that right between the guard of Moore, and boom, falls flat in his back and doesn't get up. And the sound that I heard after that happened is the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life. That place absolutely freaking erupted.
I can imagine.
And I could have yelled at the top of my lungs, and I could not have heard myself. That's how loud. How loud it was. I think it was the most remarkable. I've been doing this for a long time. being around boxing for a long time, seen a lot of big fights, and that moment was the most remarkable moment that I've ever had in boxing. Just him going down and excuse me, him dropping to his knees and praying in the corner.
Yeah.
And Aram jumps on him, and just the whole scene was just absolutely remarkable. Great moment for Foreman. Obviously, great moment for boxing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, like I said, my number one, George Foreman. I actually agree with. I actually believe George. I have the benefit of hindsight, having watched that fight again a million times, but he certainly was setting up that punch, and he wasn't doing as bad as it seemed, particularly in the second half of the fight. He was starting to catch more a little bit, and so I mean, it certainly wasn't like a one punch, out of the blue KO. But he fought a smart fight. He knew the only way he could beat Moore was to, be able to land that big shot, but he didn't just go in there for a lucky one. He set it up really, really nicely. I mean, as far as him being number one, I think it's a no-brainer. The man had been away from the sport for 10 years. I don't even think the microwave existed, during the first part of his career.
That's, yeah.
He was, 38 when he came back, and then 45 when he became the oldest man to ever win the heavyweight title. He gave the people so much joy. I mean, even my family, my parents, so much joy. But the real reason why George is number one on my list is because of how he got me through the college years with the Foreman Grill. So thank you, George, for that. And I
have one too.
I think I still have I still have one somewhere in a storage closet, but he'll forever be number one for that reason. That is going to do it for this week. We want to thank Ronnie Shields for stopping by. Don't forget, guys, plenty of boxing this Saturday, February 5th. PBC kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. And then the absolute stacked pay-per-view at 9 p.m. Keith Thurman against Mario Barrios in the main event. I can't wait to see what happens there. And we'll be here to talk about it all next week on the PBC podcast.